British police are continuing to investigate the death of the Russian tycoon and Kremlin critic Boris Berezovsky. He died at his home in southeast England at the age of 67 on the weekend. Berezovsky had survived several assassination attempts, but British police have not so far found anything suspicious about his death. The businessman was once a Kremlin insider, but sought exile in Britain after falling out with President Vladimir Putin. He accused President Putin of leading the country towards dictatorship, a view shared by many in Russia today. Months of anti-government protests last year have brought about a state crackdown that has cowed sections of the opposition. Tonight, in the first of a two-part series by Moscow correspondent Norman Hammond, we meet the writer who's become a reluctant opposition voice and the Siberian miner who's an enthusiastic supporter of life in Putin's Russia.
At the end of a snowbound street in Moscow lies the world of one of Russia's most famous writers. Millions know him as Boris Akunin. His creation, 19th century detective Erast van Doren, has featured in 13 books.
It's just like I'm entering the gates of time to another epoch.
Boris Akunin's real name is Grigory Chartishvili, and many also know him now as a somewhat reluctant voice of the opposition. He was at his second home in France when protests started in December 2011. Almost immediately, he returned to Moscow.
You have to do it because it's your country, you're a citizen of Russia, you care about what's happening and what's going to happen here.
Before he knew it, he was addressing massive anti-Putin demonstrations, condemning electoral fraud. Boris Akunin had become a sort of opposition leader. It was a role he didn't want.
I think that as a writer, you should not speak, you should write. And that's what I do. Apart from writing fiction, which is my main occupation, I also have a blog in the internet which has quite a wide audience.
It's the internet that has changed the nature of political debate in Russia. In 2009, an estimated 41 million Russians were online. By 2014, that number is expected to more than double, to 90 million users. The state monopoly on information is over.
This is the territory of freedom. They have the television, they have the newspapers. It used to be important. It's not important any longer.
It was Boris Akunin who came up with the idea for an artist's stroll through Moscow in response to Vladimir Putin's inauguration. Tens of thousands joined him. Since then, the crackdown on dissent by the state has only intensified, and the character of the opposition, he says, has changed.
It is becoming angrier, it is becoming more irritated, because we are now living through a period of political repression, and it perplexes people, it makes them angry.
Ultimately, this writer, so familiar with Russia's history, is optimistic about the future. He's confident a consensus will be reached, that the time for authoritarian rule is over, but not yet.
We have been living in this nervous situation for more than a year now, and no steps, no measures have been taken by the government to heal this, problem. The rupture is getting bigger and bigger. So I still think that the worst is yet to come.
In the capital, the country's political future was the story of much of the last year. But in Russia's vast regions, discussion of the opposition is met with a shrug. Here, what's most important is that the mines and factories are working, the paychecks are still coming in. The opposition hotbed of Moscow is almost a world away from much of the rest of Russia. This is Leninsk-Kuznetsky in central Siberia. It's a classic monogorod, a city almost entirely reliant on just one industry, in this case, coal mining. When people talk about the bedrock of Vladimir Putin's support in Russia's regions, they're talking about places like this. This city, some 3,500 kilometers east of Moscow, is not for the meek. Winter temperatures routinely hit minus 20 degrees. The mines here are privately owned, but rely heavily on support from the state. A decade ago, many wondered how long these mines would remain open. Now, under Vladimir Putin, things appear stable. For miners like Igor Ovden, the president deserves much of the credit. He's become an organizer for the ruling United Russia Party and for Vladimir Putin. Both count miners like these as some of their most ardent supporters.
As a very ordinary resident of this country, I would like to recommend both Western and foreign media just to closely follow the policy of our country that's aimed at increasing the well-being of our population. The Russians do not feel the crisis in Europe we're all watching.
Igor Ovden believes there is much that Putin critics and the Western media don't understand about the Russian president.
Oh no, Putin is not leading the country back to the USSR, not even in that direction. Putin is leading the country to be respected and be regarded as a large, strong and sovereign state.
And then it is time to head to another shift at the coalface, nearly 200 meters beneath the earth. For 25 years, Igor Ovden has worked here. For 25 years, he stripped off his gear at the end of the day and stored it in the cage to be used tomorrow. When he gets home, there are other signs of why few here are willing to abandon Vladimir Putin for the opposition. His car is a relatively new Toyota sedan. His house is built to European standards. The average salary at his mine is about $12,000 a year, enough here to enjoy a comfortable middle-class life, something nearly unthinkable in Siberia 20 years ago, something the opposition can't match.
I think that Vladimir Putin is doing the right thing. I think he tries to listen to the opposition viewpoint. But the Western media should reconsider their viewpoint of our president and tell the real story to their audience.
Of course, Russia isn't perfect, he says, but its president has made it better. Just how much of Russia's vast mineral wealth has been spent keeping industries alive in regional Russia is a mystery. But Vladimir Putin knows if the jobs start to go, his support won't be far behind. Norman Hermont, Late Line.